Hope you're doing good. So let's take a seat. Sit whatever way it works. If you're sitting on the ground, either sit on your heels or use a prop to sit up on. If you want to sit in a chair, sit in a chair. So get comfortable. And let's close our eyes. So this invitation as we close the eyes to just explore this inner space, to know this inner world. And just noticing what's there for you. You might notice the breath. You might be aware of the sounds around you or a sense of the space that you're in. And then what are the feelings that are there? What are the sensations moving through your body? Our practice has always been this process of meeting ourselves. We are these complex beings. And our tendency so often in our movement, our journey through the world, is to become overly focused on the exterior experience. And yoga has always been interested in this idea of balance, balancing all these different aspects of our lives. How we perceive ourselves in terms of the interior and exterior experience. If you can, I want you to breathe through your nose. And I want you just to begin to take some comfortably deeper breaths. And notice the movement around the ribs, around the shoulders as you take these deep breaths. That kind of expanding, buoyant feeling that happens. And as you're taking these deep breaths, could you begin to just very slowly, almost imperceptibly, sit up a little? The idea of your spine becoming a little longer. And when we begin to move into a fuller version of ourselves, and our practice, as we breathe, as we move with the body, is a way of using the physical experience to access not only a shift in the physical, but the physical then becomes a metaphor for that deeper experience of fullness. So those deep breaths, that expanding quality has that decompressive experience to it, that expanding, opening, filling up experience to it. And our practice then is interested in how do we access that quality of I am full, I am complete. How do we begin to allow ourselves to move toward that resonance, that experience? So even as you sit here and you're breathing and you're filling, and we're just slowly exploring, where can I go to in terms of being full, long, feel the hips on whatever you're sitting on, a sense of those being heavy and anchored. Breathing into the ribs. And of course, and particularly at the beginning of our practice, we meet resistance. So that may come in the form of what you're feeling in the physical, of holding or tightness, the tissue that is used to contracting or holding, having a holding pattern. But we also then begin to meet the resistance in terms of the mental emotional experience. The parts that don't want to allow us to grow or shift or change or let go of something or step into something new. That's all part of each of our experiences. So particularly at the beginning of our practice, it can be challenging. And sometimes this is why we might move more quickly at the beginning of a practice to almost distract from that inclination to simply not be here, to not want to do this work. Soften your belly. So when you find, okay, I'm sitting up full, I want you to stay with that deeper breath. Slow, long, deep inhalations. slow, steady, long exhalations. So we will move very soon, but I want you to stay with the breath to begin. So for most of us, the sympathetic nervous system, that protective aspect of the nervous system, tends to dominate our physical experience and our mental emotional experience. Kind of low level, holding us in this pattern of tightness. So as you take those deeper breaths, it's expanding through that. Like you're stretching the tissue. You think of the ribs, they're expanding. The tissue between them is expanding. The lungs are expanding. The diaphragm is expanding. So all of this quality of pulsation that you create through these deeper breaths is beginning to soften that tendency of that holding pattern. And the body remembers that its job is about expanding and contracting, that those two qualities are designed to work in harmony together. Each cell in our body, every muscle in our body, every organ in our body continually dancing this pulsation. And this is what keeps us vital. It keeps us alive. It clears us out, keeps us healthy. So as we continue to breathe in this way, it's like we're kickstarting our system back into this healthier rhythm, this more aligned, more connected rhythm. Stay with these breaths. So at the top of the next inhalation, could you pause for a few seconds? Maybe 2 or 3 seconds if you feel like you can do a little longer comfortably. Perfect. We'll do a few rounds of these. Just to pause at the top of the inhale. And then listen to the beginning of your exhalation and soften it. So you're not pushing out, forcing out. So the breath, inhaling, pausing, exhaling, has a softness and a uniformity to it. Long, slow, deep inhalation. Almost the idea, could you rest in the pause? Could you soften in the pause? And then allow the exhalation. At the end of the exhalation, you might notice an engaging or a toning of the diaphragm as you press the end of the air out of the body. And could you also bring a pause to that point at the end of the exhalation? Stay with the breath. We're nearly there. So after the next exhalation, come back to the normal breath. Come back to the normal breath. Perfect. Okay. So when we work with these breaths and we're beginning to kind of slow things down, bring them into a steadier place, quite often what will happen is the parts of us that are slightly angsty, that are uncomfortable, they're the parts that highlight themselves, that become obvious to us. And then to stay with the practice is a way of holding those places, of supporting those places in kind of healing or coming back into balance. So let's come onto our hands and knees. Let's come onto all fours. Okay. Spread the fingers. Creases in the wrist are in line with the front of the mat. Fingers are spread. See if you can do this. As you spread your fingers and your thumbs, could you grip with your fingers and your thumbs? And is it possible for a moment to lift the wrist or the heel of the hand just a millimeter off the floor? Now, you're going to notice the work through the forearm increases dramatically and the weight moves forward in the hands. And then I want you to keep the weight forward in the hands as you bring the wrists back down onto the floor. And then if you let the hands relax, do nothing, you'll notice all the weight drops into the wrist. So this is something we need to remedy. Now, it's a little difficult when it's the first thing that we're doing in our practice. So if it is uncomfortable, if you have an issue with your wrists, and many of us do have, come onto your forearms, no big deal. We're going to do some more opening with the wrists a little later. Spread the fingers, weight stays forward in the hands, elbows widen toward the sides of the room without moving the hands. Now again, you can be on the forearms, no big deal. Pull the hands toward each other. Notice what happens through the arms and through the chest. That engagement. Can you sustain that as you re-straighten the arms, as you press the earth away? Now, as you press the earth away, I want you to lift your neck. Now, I didn't say the head, the neck. The neck is tricky. We don't usually consciously move our necks. They tend to be in a particular kind of disconnected position. And when we think about the neck, automatically the head tends to want to go off and do its own thing. So the neck is the connector for the head and the body. It's a really, really important part of the body to align skillfully. So the information that's moving between the head and the heart and the gut, the movement of energy and information is increased. Now, as you do this, breathe into the ribs like we were doing earlier. Fill the ribs up. Have a little shrugging through the shoulders so you get to notice the sides of the ribs with the idea of getting longer in that space, longer in the sides of the ribs. You just get to feel them, you get to notice them. Again, our default for most of us is these spaces are shortened, they're tightened, they're protected. So we get to feel into them. Now, another layer, as you're doing all of that, notice the belly, notice the lower back, that ring of the waist area, soften it, drop it, melt it. And quite often as you do that, you're going to reveal a little bit of tightness around the back of the bottom ribs. Breathe into the tightness. Breathe into the tightness. So that back rib cage actually extends, it gets longer as you do that. Lower back relaxed. You can sway the hips a little just to encourage that. Perfect. Just a little bit more. Even close the eyes here and just think of the idea of just moving fluidly in this position. Just let your body sway, move in a way that feels comfortable and easy. A very simple version of this practice is just to feel the body, just to move in a way in which you're just in your body more. It's a kind of an odd idea, but we don't really inhabit our bodies fully, which may sound like a strange thing to say, but it's just certain parts of the body we use, and quite often we use them unconsciously, just habitually, and the body becomes this kind of get you from A to B vehicle. And really the body is such an incredible container for us, for our awareness, our consciousness, and has so much wisdom and information for us when we begin to become more sensitized to it. So when we're moving like this and feeling and noticing, it's just a way of getting in there. You don't have to work it out. You don't have to make sense of it. You just have to do it. So just another minute of this pulsing, feeling, moving. Shoulders and the hips, they're the corners of your body. The tendency when we get into unconscious patterning and inhabiting our bodies in unconscious ways, those 4 areas, those 4 corners, they get really restricted. And it's interesting that their job is actually the opposite. They're pivots. Their job is to support mobility, agility. So even this simple practice of moving, of swaying, of feeling, of noticing, this will add to vitality, mobility. It will keep us younger in our bodies. Perfect. Okay, perfect. I'm going to come up under the knees. So we lift the hands off the floor. Very simple. We'll do a little work with the wrists. We take the left hand, we hold the left wrist. So you squeeze the left wrist. I want you to then drop the fingers toward your face. So you just let the hand collapse towards you. Now, as you're doing it, as you're squeezing the wrist, I want you to squeeze super tight, particularly on this kind of inner edge of the wrist. Squeeze it super tight. And as you squeeze the wrist, drag downward, like you're trying to stretch the wrist toward the elbow. So you're stretching. Now, keeping that stretch, the hand and the fingers tilt away from you. They stretch away from you. Stretch out, and then release everything, and we begin again. Drop the hand towards you, squeeze the wrist, stretch downward, and the hand and fingers again stretch away from you. And then one more time, squeeze, drop down, stretch hand and fingers away. And then release. And then for a moment, you just hold the hands in front of you, close the eyes, and just notice the difference in the feeling in the wrists. You'll notice how that wrist you worked with will feel a little bit more swollen or expanded, or maybe a sense of lightness, that you've switched it on basically. And this is what happens with so many parts of our bodies. They just get switched off. Because we're inhabiting in particular ways, because certain places are shut off, they get switched off and the bigger system just can't do the job it's designed to. Now, if you don't feel any difference in the wrist, it probably means that you just haven't done it enough. It means that the holding pattern in the wrist is a bit deeper, and then you work it more and it'll begin to open up. Okay, second side. So you're holding the wrist, you drop the hand towards you, you squeeze the wrist and you're dragging down. Squeeze tight now, and then stretch hand and fingers away. Also means that the energy, the information, the blood that moves through the wrist and into the hand and into the fingers begins to increase. So a lot of people get things like arthritis in the hands and the fingers. All of this will begin to clear that. Because again, so much of what happens as we get a little older is the internal movement in the body diminishes. And then all kinds of issues come where the things are just not being cleared out of the system. And it's those calcifications, those accumulations of waste in the body that make us sick. Okay, let's take the left foot forward. We'll keep the left hand on the knee. We're going to bring the right hand down to the floor. I'm going to slide the right hand a little further to the right, and I'm going to turn toward the front leg. Now, I want to be careful with this weighted shoulder, this bottom shoulder, to not let it jut forward. So if you can see that bottom hand, that bottom elbow, I want you to turn the elbow toward the thumb or even toward the fingers. And you'll feel it create that lengthening of the inner shoulder, and it sets the arm bone, the humerus bone, in relation to the collarbone and the scapula. That's the 3 bones of your shoulder. Front of the body turns toward the front leg, not toward the floor. Other hand, left hand on the ribs, on the left ribs. Fingers go forward, thumb goes back if you can. If it's too much, you can try turning the other way, but the tendency when you turn the other way is the shoulder juts forward. Breathe, breathe. Now, a little shrugging in the shoulders. Same thing we were doing when we were on the hands and knees. Just a little kind of freedom movement, just easy, simple. So for many of us, again, our strongest pattern is to protect and tighten. If you're going into positions that you're not sure about or you think might be difficult, there's an unconscious program there that goes protect, protect, protect. So when you breathe and you move, you're encouraging freedom. You're encouraging the body just to let go and open up and go with it. Okay, remember the bottom hand and how you're working it. The fingers are working, the base of the fingers are weighted down, and then I want you to push that hand into the floor. So the ribs you're holding, press upward, open upward. Just breathe into what you're meeting. Breathe into what you're meeting. Breathe for 3. Breathe for 2. Breathe for 1. Beautiful. Okay, let me just change sides. Really simple. And try not to fall over. Again, bottom hand and arm, you line it up. So for many of us, the inner deltoid, the inner shoulder is tighter because we've overworked that part of every time we take the arm forward, it overworks that inner part. And it tends to want to lock the arm bone slightly forward. And then this is why many of us will have issues with our shoulders, with our necks, with our jaws, is this bone is locked forward. And when we work then through the arm, we'll perpetually overwork one part. And this creates havoc in our body and it wears the shoulders out. Okay, so you line it up, hand to the ribs, little shrugging here, really simple. Fluid, just feeling, noticing, pushing the earth, lifting, opening those ribs. You probably notice the two sides feel different. One side probably feels tighter than the other. There's a whole other story in that, but it's perfectly normal. Again, this is kind of, in terms of the body being a resource of information, a language, if you will. You know, the more we spend time doing these practices and incorporate them into our lives, the more we're able to read the body and understand why things are happening in the body. There's an intuitive understanding that awakens. Breathe, enjoy. Breathe 3. Breathe 2. And breathe 1. Perfect. Okay, first side again. Take your time, set it up. A little shrugging through the two shoulders. Front of the body that wants to turn to the floor, we just turn it toward the side, toward the front leg, that kind of direction. Bottom hand and arm, we take our time, we feel into that, we align that. Okay, let's take the free hand to the back of the neck. So initially you bring your chin a little closer to your chest. We're not turning the head further than the rest of the body. We hold the back of the neck, cup the back of the neck. Now you can see that left elbow. The left arm is horizontal, meaning it's not tilted down, it's not tilted up. So you can see that. You make that happen. And then I want you to lean your neck back. Lean back. You're pressing back into the hand. Now, as you're leaning back, you'll notice that left elbow begins to tilt toward the right. So you let that continue to whatever feels available. And it's going to open up certain parts of the body. You're going to feel tightness in certain places. You just go to the point that you can sustain. Breathing into wherever the tightness is. If you feel you can turn the front of the body a little bit toward the sky, a little bit upward, try that out. Stay with it, top elbow stretching. So from the elbow all the way back to the hip, you've got that elongation. Breathe 3, breathe 2, breathe 1, and then we release that. Beautiful. Okay, second side. Take your time, feel into the foundation. Yeah, no matter where you go with your practice, it's always going to be about steady, strong, aligned foundation. And when you create that, it's like the roots of a tree. It means you can grow upward more. You can open up, you can expand. Okay, back of the neck. Take your time. Even with that hand, that right hand, feel the back of the neck. Like how often, you know, particularly, like most of us never pay attention to our neck unless it's in pain. And again, it perpetually is out of alignment. So the elbow, forearm is horizontal. We lean the neck back, lean back, lean back, lean back. Right elbow tilting toward the left. Tilt it, tilt, whatever feels available. Don't have to force. We are playing the edge, but we're not pushing past it. Breathe. Bottom hand, the fingers, thumb are working. The weight is forward. Maybe we can turn a little bit to the sky. The head, neck, heart, all is one piece moving. And breathe and enjoy for 3, for 2, for 1. And then we'll release and we'll come back onto hands and knees. Now we've done a little work with our hands. We might do a little bit more here. So if I bring the weight over to the left side, I'm going to work with my right hand. So I make a fist. I've got my thumb over my fingers and I turn the fingers toward my body, toward my legs. And I bring the metacarpal knuckles down onto the floor. The metacarpals, those knuckles at the base of the fingers, they're the foundation here. They stay on the floor, okay? The game is whenever or wherever we go with this, keep the fist, keep the thumb pressing into the fingers. They're going to want to splay open. I encourage you, don't let that happen. And that creates the boundary for this particular stretch. Keeping the fist, the metacarpals stay down, you tilt the wrist toward the floor, wherever it goes to. Now you get to a point at which it's going to feel tight through the wrist and through the forearm. When you get there, you just pause and breathe. You don't have to go further. You don't have to get the wrist down. You just have to meet what's there. Keep the thumb actively pressing. So when you keep the fist, the whole wrist is engaged. This is the position you want to have it in as you're stretching it. So it's working. Then you can also roll to the index finger and over to the little finger, and you roll around and you're looking for those little pockets of tightness or holding that are in the wrist and up through the forearm. These are little areas that we never get to work into. So breathe into what you're meeting, pause at any place that feels appropriate. Keep the thumb actively pushing into the fingers. You bend the elbow deeper, it gets easier. You get straighter in the arm, it gets harder. And breathe and feel. Stay with it. A couple more breaths here. Nice. And then lift it, release it, just shake it out, open and close it. And then put it down. And before you go anywhere else, close the eyes and notice, feel the two sides, feel the two hands. Notice where the hand you just worked with has more of a sense of anchoring. So it connects to the earth more. There's a movement of energy and information, not only through our body, but also through how we connect to solidness, to the earth, how we feel a sense of being part of something bigger. And again, usually with the sympathetic nervous system tightening us, it's this hugging in, it's this kind of, I don't trust anything. And when we open the body up and open the tissue up, it's like these antennae come out, these energetic roots begin to work. So second side. Right, left hand, you make the fist, you turn the fingers towards you, you just put the hand down. So again, the base of the fingers stay on the earth and you're tilting the back of the hand of the wrist toward the floor. It might only go a millimeter, it doesn't matter. You're rolling index finger, the little finger, you're exploring. When you find a pocket that feels tight, just pause there and breathe and just give it some time. Just give it some time. There's no rush. This is the way in which we meet our own body, we meet our own limitations. This is the way we create alchemy or we transform what's going on. But even before that, it's a way of just simply meeting ourselves, meeting what's actually there. And just breathing and acknowledging and noticing. And in some sense, we're noticing ourselves more fully. It's like we're getting a fuller picture of ourselves because it includes our limitations, our restrictions. It includes our shadow, our stuff. And when we meet that with the breath, with awareness, something beautiful happens for us. Again, it's one of those paradoxes within spirituality that by meeting the shadow, turning toward the pain or the discomfort in a way that's skillful, where you're not forcing, it begins to let the light in. So just breathe, notice, move, tilt, take your time. Breathe, you got this. For 3, for 2, keep the finger pressing into the thumb, or the thumb pressing into the finger. 1 more breath. Nice. And then release it. Open and close it. Nice. And then 2 hands down on the mat. So the hands will with more agility and less effort, because you've opened up the channels in which everything gets to move into the hand more easily. The blood, the way the muscle can engage and work. Now, again, on the hands and knees, lower back relaxes, hips sway a little. Deep breath in the ribs. Everything's beginning to soften that space. So almost a sense of the bum sticking up a little as you do that. What happens is your thigh bone and your hip drops backwards. So can you keep that arch in the lower back? And then the left knee and hip, the left leg, lift an inch off the floor. You can keep the foot down, but just the hip, knee lift an inch, and then the other side. Just one side. And where I'd like you to focus the awareness is in your hip. It's a waddle in your hip. You lift the hip and the leg follows. Think of it that way. You lift the hip and the leg follows. So this is mechanically moving, sucking the thigh bone deeper into the acetabula. The glutes are active as you're doing this. So in this position, these glute muscles, the butt muscles are working. These are the engine of your body. And for many of us, and particularly in the West, they're fast asleep. They're not doing their job efficiently. And they create so much continuity of engagement and work through the back of your body when they begin to fire properly. Okay, if we go a little further, pause for a moment. Try to maintain the arch. Just be aware that belly is relaxed. Lift the left knee out to the left. Make circles with the knee. Now, you're trying not to tighten the belly and lift it. You're trying to isolate the work in the pelvis. So you're feeling the movement in your hip. Just pay attention to that. Be in that space. And then release that down. Do the second leg, the other side. You notice it's a lot of supportive work in the grounded leg, grounded hip. Bring it down, first side again, just waking things up. Move that knee in the other direction. Try not to drop the head or bend the and release that second side. So we go in one direction and we go in the other direction. Nice work. And then bring it down. Okay, one more time here. Left knee tilts to the side, left leg extends, and then bend the knee. So we keep it lifted, bend and extend. Bend and extend. Bend and extend. Now one more time, extend, big toe comes down. So the foot is to the left of your hip. Big toe comes down, ball of the big toe comes down. Heel mightn't want to come down all the way, that's fine. But then can you anchor the little toe side? So you get this big stretch through the outer ankle and the outer shin. So keeping that, look at the left leg, look at the left knee. I want it horizontal as opposed to pointing up or pointing down. Horizontal. Bend the knee forward and stick the bum back. So as you stick the bum back, again, you're working toward that arching in the lower back, that arching in that space. Now, breathe into the ribs, shrug a little through the shoulders, just to loosen and open up that upper body. Move the head a little so you're not tilting or dropping or drooping. That breath expanding the ribs. We want to keep the curves as best we can and just begin to walk the arms over toward that extended leg. And then getting to a sense of stretch or tightening on the right side, pause and breathe into it. Pause and breathe into it. If you feel like you want, left hand can go on the left calf. Breathe into what you're meeting. Now, I don't want you to move the left foot, but I want you to actively push it into the floor. Push it into the floor. Breathe for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And we bring everything back and we step it in. And then let stuff sway or move just to release and loosen. Okay, perfect. So again, lower back is relaxed. Ribs are full. Quite often for many of us, when we relax the lower back, because the back of our rib cage is used to compressing, it becomes a really heavy, dead weight over the lower back and creates all kinds of issues. So you're breathing into the lower back or into the ribs and trying to feel a quality of expanding, lifting, a buoyancy, lifting the neck to support that. Okay, second side. Tilt the right knee. First extend and bend and extend and bend and extend and bend. You got it. Keep going. Okay, next time you extend, big toe, ball of the big toe, little toe. Okay, knee bends slightly forward. Again, it's not pointing up or down. You go to whatever's accessible. So it's like a seesaw. As the knee goes forward, the hip goes back. You stick your butt out. Imagine you could create an arching in the lower back. Breathe into the ribs, shrug a little through the shoulders. Stay with it. Walk the arms toward that extended leg. As you meet tightness, you just pause and breathe. Again, if you want to go further, you can put the hand on the calf. Breathe. Give the body time. So our minds are so used to, stuff happening. This idea of the pill, take a pill mentality. And yet our bodies are inviting us to a slower experience. So much of, particularly as we grow older, the limitations we begin to through our bodies. And in one sense, it would be great if they weren't there, but they are. They're part of our becoming wiser as we use these limitations to grow. Breathe. Okay, you got it. Come on back in. Okay, so now we're going to come down onto the forearms. Walk your knees back an inch or two. Let the lower back relax again. Same thing. So imagine, even if you close the eyes, and imagine the curvature in your spine. This is the stuff we're trying to reawaken. And the tissue around the spine, as we let the curves reappear, begins to work more efficiently. Elbows are under the shoulders. They're not forward of the shoulders. They're not closer together. They're right under the shoulders. Push the forearms down until you feel a broadening around the shoulder blades, a filling up. And as you press down, the neck is still elevated. You're not drooping the head forward. So the gaze is toward the hands or maybe slightly forward. Okay, lower back is relaxed. Breathe into those ribs. So think of the bottom back ribs, the bottom side ribs. Just again, get the attention in those spaces. How often do we go into the back of our body? Unless it's in pain and the attention is drawn there, and it's a very particular type of attention. It's a wanting it to be a different way type of attention, but just to feel these spaces. Again, without moving anything, push the knees away from each other. Feel that widening action in the hips. Without moving anything, begin to pull the forearms, elbows backwards toward the legs, till you get a sense of the belly, the abdomen getting longer and stronger, toning. Now, anything tightens in the back, you breathe into it. You've got to balance all of this. Stay with it. Could you keep what's going on, but even bring a little bit of shrugging, small movement through the shoulders, with the idea, could I get a little longer between my hips and my shoulders? Is there a little bit more space? Don't drop the head. You can move the head and neck a little. Maintain the resistance, still pressing the knees apart, sticking the bum up, elbows dragging backwards. Breathe into the tightest spaces now. And I don't want you to use so much effort you're going to burn out. Just enough to find the alignment, the tone. For 3, for 2. Nice. And then softening. Don't drop or droop or collapse. Just soften. Close the eyes. Notice the breath. Okay. So what we're going to do next is we're going to lift the knees and the hips. As you go up, I want you to think of the pelvis, the hips leading the way. So usually what will happen is we'll tighten our belly, the buttocks drops, and the back goes up. I want you to find that arch in the lower back so the bum is sticking up.
Tuck the toes under, lift the hips up. Walk the feet a little closer to the arms, but a little wider apart. So they're in a kind of a squatting position. Now, you've still got the elbows under the shoulders. You're still pressing down through the forearms. You're still broad in the back. You haven't dropped the head. We're still looking down at the wrists of the hands. Toes are gripping. Could you stick the bum up a little here? Could you deepen the arch in the lower back? Can you sustain that? And then begin to stretch the legs straighter. And then bend the knees deep. And then stretch the legs straighter. Breathe. Keep going. Stay with it. For 5, and 4, and 3, 2, and 1. Beautiful. Bring the 2 knees down. Okay, release the hands. One hand flat on top of the other. Let the elbows go wide. Bring the forehead down on the top hand. Melt here. Hips stay up over the knees. Lower back melting. Everything melting as best you can. And stay in that position. And in that position, breathe into the upper back. Breathe into the upper back. So again, this idea of buoyancy. And as the tissue expands, the whole thing becomes more buoyant. So breathe into that and just notice how that upper back area kind of lifts a little bit. But just the breath doing the work. Just the breath. Stay with that. Breathe. Good work. Stay with it for 3. Then for 2. And then for 1. Okay. So we got the head on the hands. When we go to lift the head, I want you to think of the head, the neck, and the torso as one piece. So if one part moves, all part moves. If one part isn't going to be able to move, no parts can move. Slowly press down through the elbows and forearms. Slowly lift the head. Feel the neck is moving too. You can come up onto the hands. Separate the hands. And then shrug a little through the shoulders. Sway a little through the hips like before. Relax the lower back. Breathe into the ribs, into the sides of the ribs, into the armpits. We're looking for the biggest version of ourselves, the most expanded, the fullest version of ourselves. We do it through this physical experience because the physical body works better. Things separate, tissue expands and becomes more elasticated, blood moves more freely, the body's capacity to clean and clear itself increases. Equally, again, because it's a metaphor for that deeper sense of I am full. You know, when you think about the society we live in, how much are we bombarded by you're not full, you're not complete. If you don't get this, you're not. Like that's such a pernicious voice, you know, and it's such a part of the ego. It's like you're not enough, you're not enough, you're not enough. And frankly, it's bullshit. So you breathe and you feel, and we begin to open to this fuller version of ourselves. This is the direction we're going in. I am full. I am complete. We're playing with it. We're seeing how it sits in our body. We're seeing how it feels. We're noticing what in us isn't aligned to that. And we're owning it. The parts of ourselves that are stuck in the fear of not being enough, not being lovable, not being good enough. We all have it. We all have those parts. But maybe we could bring them into a more conscious experience. And in that way, then they become fuel or food for a deeper understanding. Bring the 2 legs over to the left. Lower the hips down to the right. Okay, so the hips are heavy on the floor. We'll keep them there. We'll push the earth away. So the 2 hands, and you might only have 1 hand on the floor. It doesn't matter. Push the earth away. You're working the hands in the same way that we were earlier. Without moving the hands, pull them towards you. Now, the stretch you're tuning into, you're breathing into that space. Breathe into the tightness. Breathe into it. You got it. Breathe for 3. Breathe for 2. Breathe for 1, and then bend the elbows and soften. And we come back to the knees. Let things sway and shrug and move. So we're opening to a greater quality of freedom. It's almost like freedom gets trapped in the body and we're not able to access it. Things are holding and tight. And through the work, we just get to unveil it. Second side. Again, let the hips stay heavy. Very simple. Press the hands down, not just the wrists. So push through the base of the fingers, grip of the fingers without moving. Pull the hands toward you. Again, the tightness that you're feeling into, you're aware of, you're breathing into now. Breathe into it. Breathe into it. Breathe 3. Breathe 2. Breathe 1. Beautiful. Okay, so we're going to come down onto the side and then all the way up onto our backs. Get comfortable. Keep the knees bent. 2 feet on the floor. Release the arms either side. Bit of space between the arms and the torso. Let the palms face up. The gaze is toward the ceiling. Okay. Close the eyes for a moment. Notice the breath. Breathe through the nose. Could we go back to those longer, deeper breaths? Nothing forced or strained. So as deep as you can go comfortably, easily. And this time, could you make the breath continuous? So the exhalation, inhalation, there's no pausing, no break. It's as fluid as you can possibly make it. Slow, long, deep, steady. Stay with this breath. Stay with it, you got it. Beautiful, okay. Let the breath come back to its natural rhythm. Okay, I'm going to take left ankle over right thigh. Left ankle over the right thigh. We move that right foot a little to the left. We move the hips a little to the left. And we let the legs drop over to the right. Okay, so you've got the sole of the left foot on the floor. Now, a couple of options here. If it's accessible, the right hand is going to hold the left ankle. If it's accessible. If it's too far away, don't bother. No big deal. Okay? If you're holding the ankle, you need to focus on that side of the ribs and just open them up. Breathe into them. Drop the shoulders as best you can. Let the front of the throat feel open. Either way, that left foot stays on the floor and the weight is distributed evenly through the foot, meaning you're not tilting to the side of the foot. It's distributed evenly. Now here, maintain that. The top knee, that left knee, just begins to tilt away from you, just millimeter by millimeter. And it'll bring you into the tightness in your left hip, the holding, the hidden contraction in the hip. The moment you feel that, the moment you've accessed that, you just pause and you breathe into it. And you pause and you breathe into it. So it's not about how far you can get. You keep the foot anchored so you're not tilting. And it's just about witnessing, noticing, feeling, accessing, seeing what it is that we're carrying around.
And one of the gifts of our body is our body really wants to support us. It wants to get us from A to B. It wants to help us get the job done. And quite often what it'll do is it'll lock away some of the pain, some of the holding, some of the resistance, some of the wounding. It'll just compartmentalize it. And our practice is this safe, gentle, conscious reopening of these places. So as we meet them, we just breathe and we settle. And you then give these places an opportunity to release. And as they release energy, information, blood, whatever needs to go through, move through these places, and they become included in the bigger movement of the body. In a sense, we begin to inhabit them again. Stay with it, breathe for 3, for 2, for 1. Now relax, stay in that position, but relax. And let the hand go, take the 2 arms wide. Can you let that left knee drop towards you now, just to wherever it goes to, and then stretch the left foot out. Just stretch it over to the right. Now, wherever you're noticing tension, twisting, breathe into that now. Breathe into what you're meeting. Breathe for 5, 4, 3. You move your foot around just to feel if there's any holding in the ankle and the leg. 2, 1. And then just bring that leg all the way back. We'll end up with the 2 feet on the floor, knees pointing toward the sky. Very simple. Right ankle over the left thigh. So the left foot to the right, the hips a little to the right, and then we drop the leg over. So that right foot ends up on the floor. Now you might find that the right foot doesn't come all the way to the floor and it's hovering, and that's fine too. If that's the case, the sole of the foot is facing the floor. If it's accessible, the left hand holds the ankle or indeed the top of the foot, either's fine. That left side of the ribs, we don't want to keep it tight and contracted. We want to breathe and just explore what's available. And in a sense, that's all our practice is. It's an exploration of what's available, what we could step into, what we could realize in terms of potential. Top knee slowly tilting away, meeting the tightness in the hip. And as you awaken to it, as you align to it, as you connect to it, you just breathe into it. Imagine you could breathe into it. Front of the throat still open. Breathe 5, 4, 3. Breathe 2. Nice. So again, we're going to stay in this position. We release the hands, take the 2 arms wide. We let the right knee tilt or drop toward us, wherever it goes to. Then extend that right foot over to the left. Just stretch it over to the left. And again, whatever you're meeting, whatever's available or noticed in the body, that's where the breath is. That's where the awareness is. Breathe. Breathe. Breathe for 3. And for 2. And for 1. Beautiful. Okay. Bring the leg back, 2 feet on the floor. Hips back to center. Okay, feet are hip distance. Spread the toes. Grip with your toes. Grip with your toes. Without moving your feet, drag them toward your bum. Without moving them. Yeah? And then let it relax. Let it all relax. And then do it again. Grip with the toes. Pull the feet toward the hips. Let it release. Keep doing that and just notice. Notice the back of the legs where you're engaging, releasing, engaging, releasing. What's happening in the hips as you pull your feet towards your hips? What happens in there? Do you notice the way there's a tilting in the pelvis? which anchors or roots the buttocks down and lifts the lower back. Okay, one more time, engage and sustain. Actively press the bum down. Now, as you do that, take the two arms up to the sky, just very gently in the beginning. Breathe more deeply. I want you to widen the shoulders as you breathe, the armpits wide. And as you feel they've gotten as wide as they can, even take the hands a little wider. They're almost like a V shape. Stretch the fingers toward the sky, toward the ceiling. Press the back of the head down, and then slowly tilt your chin away from your chest to get longer in the front of the throat. So the feet, toes gripping, pulling towards you, bum pressing down, arching the lower back there. Ribs are full, arms stretching up, back of the head pressing down. I want you to keep the bum down, lift the feet so the shins are horizontal. Press the back of the head so much that the shoulders get lighter or even lift a little. Keep the front of the throat long. Slowly extend the arms halfway over the head. Not all the way to the floor, halfway. Arms like a V shape. Stretch out through the arms. Breathe for 5. You got this. For 4. For 3. For 2. For 1. Everything lets go. Everything releases. Soles of the feet together. 2 knees drop wide. If you're catching, if it's sore to do this, bring the knees back. Walk the feet apart. Drop the knees together. Okay. First version, soles of the feet together, knees drop wide. Take the arms either side, let the palms turn up, close the eyes. Come back to your breath. Breathe through the nose. Inhale for 5, exhale for 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If that is too long, do it for 4. If that's too long, do it for 3. Fluid, steady, uniform, simple. Now stay with this breath. Stretch one leg out. Stretch 2 legs out. Feet are going to stay a little wider than the hips. Body heavy on the earth. Slow, long, deep breath. Stay with the breath. I know for many of us, as we begin to slow down, the tendency or the inclination can be to leave. But I really encourage you to stick out the slowing down process, that it really supports embedding the work deeper into the nervous system. And this is really the part of the practice that integrates. Slow, long, deep breath. Stay with this breath. Stay with the breath a little bit longer. Now, allow the breath to return to its natural rhythm. So in a sense, you're being breathed. Your job is to let your body drop deeper. Stay close to your breath. Take a few deeper breaths. Just the toes and fingers moving. Tiniest of movements. Just noticing I'm going to bend the knees one at a time. I'm going to roll over to the side. Hand arm as a pillow. Get comfortable. Stay here. Come back to the breath. Notice your inhalation and your exhalation. Stay with the breath. And then take your time and we'll come to sitting. So get comfortable in your seat, sit whatever way you want to, sit up on a chair if you want to do that. And when you get there, let's close the eyes. And we did this at the beginning of our practice. We just checked in. We moved into that inner landscape. I suppose in some respects, all we're doing is meeting ourselves, getting more comfortable with ourselves. That I think a lot of what a lot of us do is run away from parts of ourselves, parts of what we're holding in ourselves. That if we've had experiences that were difficult or traumatic, and we haven't had the ability or the skills to process or deal with them, we hold them, we keep them in our bodies until it's time for us to do that work. And this is what we're doing even through the practice this morning, is opening up and moving in. And quite often we realize that a lot of the fears that we had about certain things that we may be carrying, that those fears are unfounded, that it's okay, that we're okay. So notice the breath again here. Let your belly relax, your jaw relax, let your eyelids get heavier. Bring the hands together in front of the heart. So the sound Om. Take a deep breath. Three more. before we finish our practice, could you think about gratitude? When was the last time you remember feeling grateful? When was the last time you remember feeling that feeling envelop you? Gratitude is one of those foundational parts of us that as we drop deeper into ourselves, there is an innate gratitude, not necessarily for anything in particular, but a great way of accessing it is in our relationships. You know, our relationship to this day, maybe our relationship to somebody or something that happened. Can you think of someone or something that allows you to feel gratitude? Can you find that feeling within yourself? Not just the thought or the idea, but can you actually ignite the feeling? Can you stay with that feeling? Could you imagine you're breathing into the feeling and filling it up like a balloon expanding? So gratitude begins to move from the heart outward. And take the hands just to lightly touch the forehead. And then to our lips. And back to the heart. And then for a moment we'll bow our heads. And we bow to this place within ourselves, this place of deep presence, deep wisdom within ourselves, that we're working toward knowing and experiencing and seeing more clearly. But equally we bow toward the shadow, the parts of ourselves that we find difficult or uncomfortable. They are the fuel that will allow us to really go deeper. And then release the hands. And open the eyes. Good work. Well done. So thank you very much for joining in this morning. If anybody has feedback, please feel free to let me know. This practice will be available for anybody at a later time as well. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, I would like you to do that. Just a button on the YouTube channel. That'd be great. And of course, if you want to donate or pay for the classes or have a subscription for them, you can do that on my website too. So I hope you have a good Sunday. Stay warm, stay dry, and I wish you the very best. Thanks.